10 things. Every single day. Not occasionally. Not when conditions are favorable. Not when the mood is right. Every day. That is the only thing that separates these habits from the ones most people have already heard and already do not do. What I am about to describe is not a secret. None of it is hidden knowledge. Every wealthy person I ever knew personally, and I knew several, did versions of all 10 of these things every single day. And almost none of the people around them did any of them. The gap between wealth and the absence of it is not hidden in some discovery. It is hidden in the consistency of daily practice. Let me show you exactly what those practices are. I am Henry Ford. What I built was built daily, in small specific actions that compounded across years. The company did not arrive in one great moment of genius. It was assembled piece by piece, in days that each contained the same basic disciplines. I want to walk you through exactly what those disciplines looked like and how you can put every one of them into your own day starting tomorrow. Listen to this every morning this week. Let it become the frame for how you start. The first thing rich people do daily is decide before the day begins what the day is for. Not a to-do list, not a schedule. A decision about the purpose of the day. One sentence. What is the single most important thing this day must produce? Not must accomplish, not must include, must produce. A tangible output that did not exist before. Write it down before anything else happens. Before correspondence, before conversation, before the demands of other people have had a chance to name the day for you, most people let the day name itself. They wake up and begin responding to what arrived overnight, to what is expected of them, to the most urgent thing on the list. By midday, the day has become what the demands made it. The one thing they intended to produce either got pushed to tomorrow or got squeezed into a distracted hour at the end when the mind was already tired. Wealthy men I knew, and I include myself almost uniformly, had a version of this practice. They knew what the day was for before it started. That did not mean nothing unexpected happened. It meant that when the unexpected arrived, it was encountered by a man who had already decided the shape of the day, and the unexpected had to fit into that shape rather than replace it. The second thing is that rich people protect an hour each day that produces nothing visible. No meetings. No correspondence, no tasks from anyone else's list, an hour of thinking, of planning, of sitting with the most important problem in front of them without any pressure to produce output within the hour itself. The output comes later. The hour is for the quality of thinking that rushes do not allow. Edison kept this kind of time more deliberately than anyone I have known. He called it doing nothing, which was his way of keeping other people from trying to fill it. He was not doing nothing. He was doing the thinking that made everything else possible. The famous productivity, the inventions, the relentless output, all of it was downstream of hours that looked idle from the outside. When I was building the engine in the shed on Bagley Avenue, the hours I spent sitting with the problem, before picking up any tools, were the hours the work actually happened. The physical work was execution. The thinking was the building. Every time I rushed the thinking to get to the doing produced more wrong turns than right ones. Every time I gave the thinking its full hour before touching anything, the execution was faster and cleaner. Protect the hour. It will feel like wasted time for weeks. Then the compounding will become visible. The third thing rich people do daily is act on the most important task before the least important ones. This sounds obvious. It is almost universally violated. The least important tasks are almost always easier, faster, more satisfying to complete, and more urgently demanded by other people. The most important task is usually harder, longer, less immediately rewarding, and entirely self-imposed. Left to compete freely, the least important tasks win every day, because they have every structural advantage. The wealthy person does not leave them to compete freely. The most important task gets the first usable hours of the day, not the hours after the correspondence is cleared. Not the hours when everything else is handled. The first hours, when the mind is fresh and the distractions have not yet accumulated their full weight. A man I knew from my early years in the industry, a foundry operator named Lewis, who had built a small but genuinely profitable operation on the south side of Detroit, described his daily practice to me once with a simplicity that stayed with me. He said he did the thing he most did not want to do first, before anything else, without negotiation. The thing he most did not want to do was always the most important one. The resistance to it was the signal that it mattered. He said he had discovered years earlier that if he did not do it before 10 in the morning, it would not be done that day. Lewis's foundry ran without disruption for decades. His competitors, including several larger operations, came and went. He attributed most of his longevity to that one practice. Most important task first, without exception. The fourth thing is that rich people end each day with a brief account of what actually moved forward. Not a review of what was done, not a survey of what remains. A clear, honest answer to one question. What exists now that did not exist this morning because of what I did today? This is the question that separates productive days from busy days. Busy days are full of motion. Productive days produce something that was not there before. The two feel similar from the inside. The end-of-day question makes the difference visible. I kept this practice for most of my working life. On the days when I could answer the question with something specific, this component was tested, this decision was made, this problem was solved. The next day started with the momentum of completed work. On the days when I could not answer it, when the day had been full and tiring and nothing had moved forward in the direction that mattered, the question forced me to understand why. What had consumed the day that should not have? What had been avoided that should have been faced? The question is not an accusation. It is a calibration. After 30 days of honest answers, the shape becomes visible. Which types of days produce results, and which produce only activity, and the pattern can be changed. Play this again tomorrow after you do your end-of-day review. The habit and the message will reinforce each other. The fifth thing rich people do daily is read in a way that produces action, not in a way that produces only knowledge. There is a style of reading that is essentially leisure. The reader absorbs, follows the argument, finishes the book, and feels educated. Nothing changes in what they do. The knowledge joined the existing library of knowledge and stayed there. This reading has real value. It is not the reading that builds wealth. The reading that builds wealth ends with a decision. Before closing the page, the reader asks, "What is one thing I will do differently today or tomorrow because of what I just read?" The answer is written down. The action is taken. The knowledge becomes operational rather than decorative. Carnegie read in this way. He once described to a gathering I attended, years before his name meant everything it eventually meant, the practice of reading one specific thing each day and committing to one application of it before the next sunrise. Not a large application, one small one. He said the compounding of those small daily applications of new knowledge was more responsible for the position he had reached than any single insight or opportunity. Carnegie was not a man given to overstatement. When he described a practice with that degree of conviction, I paid attention. The reading to action habit is one I adopted directly from that description, and it is one I believe costs more in the not doing than most people understand. The sixth thing is that rich people practice what I would call deliberate gratitude, and it is nothing like what that phrase usually means. It is not feeling thankful for good fortune. It is not keeping a gratitude journal in the sentimental sense. It is a daily act of identifying what is already working in the current building, what evidence exists today that the direction is producing results, not hoping for results, not planning for results. Current, visible, measurable evidence that the approach is working. This has a function that is practical rather than emotional. The mind that starts the day focused on what is failing will find more failure than actually exists, because attention amplifies what it rests on. The mind that has first taken note of what is working arrives at the problems with a different posture. It is not blind to the problems. It approaches them from a position that includes the evidence of what is already succeeding. I used this during the worst years of the early company, when the challenges were genuinely serious and the list of things not working was objectively long. The practice of starting each day with what was working, however small, however partial, was the practice that kept the work moving forward in the periods when the weight of the problems would otherwise have been enough to stop it. 30 seconds. What is working today? Name it specifically before you name anything else. The seventh thing rich people do daily is review their financial position and make at least one decision that moves it forward. Not obsession over numbers, not anxiety about the balance. A deliberate, calm, daily look at the actual financial picture followed by one specific decision in a forward direction. Move this amount here. Cut this expense. Redirect this resource toward that producing activity. One decision, daily. Most people look at their finances weekly at best, monthly at worst, and when they do, the looking is colored by anxiety or avoidance rather than clear analysis. The daily brief review removes the weight of the numbers by making them familiar. A number you look at every day loses the power to frighten you. It becomes information, and information is workable in a way that anxiety is not. This is the habit I believe has the most immediately measurable of all 10 if kept consistently. Within a month of daily financial review combined with one daily forward decision, most people find that the position has moved visibly. Not dramatically, the decisions are small, but measurably. And measurable movement, seen daily, produces a different relationship with the financial picture than the picture most people carry. The eighth thing is that rich people maintain at least one relationship each day that is directly connected to the direction they are building toward. Skip the broad approach. One person who is genuinely relevant to your work, who is genuinely relevant to the work. A letter, a brief conversation, a visit, a response to something they sent. One real contact per day with the circle of people whose work touches yours. The cumulative effect of this over years is a web of relationships so dense and current that opportunity moves through it almost automatically, because the web has been maintained rather than assembled in a rush when opportunity is needed. Harvey Firestone was the most consistent practitioner of this I have ever known. He was in daily contact with a circle of people broad, varied, carefully maintained, and the results were visible, not just in the business he built, but in the quality of what arrived at his door without his seeking it. Firestone was not a man who found opportunity by searching for it. He was a man whose daily practice of relationship maintenance meant that opportunity found him, because the people who created it knew where he was and what he was working on. One contact per day, not 10. One real one. The ninth thing rich people do daily is make a physical contribution to their own health. Not an extreme practice, not hours of exercise or rigid dietary systems. Something. Daily movement, daily attention to what is consumed, daily investment in the instrument that produces everything else. A body that is maintained with daily attention performs better across decades than one that is maintained in bursts of discipline, followed by extended neglect. I was not a man who lectured anyone about health. I was a man who observed, over many years, that the men who operated with the most sustained energy and clarity were the ones who treated their physical condition as a daily practice rather than a periodic intervention. The ones who neglected it until the neglect became a problem were the ones whose work suffered in the periods of poor condition, sometimes permanently. 15 minutes of deliberate physical attention every day. Nothing complicated. Movement, rest that is genuinely restorative, food that sustains rather than merely satisfies. This is not a health lecture. This is a daily practice that compounds over years into a capacity that the neglectors simply do not have available. 10. This is the one that ties all 9 together, and without it the other 9 are useful practices that each produce isolated value but never build toward each other. The 10th thing rich people do daily is recommit each morning to the specific direction they have decided on. No affirmations, no performed enthusiasm, a clear, quiet act of recommitment to the one direction that has been chosen, renewed before the day has had any opportunity to redirect them toward other people's priorities or to introduce the doubt that an ordinary difficult day produces. Here is why this is the one that everything else depends on. The other 9 habits, the productive work, the protected hour, the financial review, the relationship maintenance, all of them derive their value from being pointed in a direction. Without a clear direction that is renewed daily, they are each individually useful but collectively unfocused. Productive work toward what? The protected hour thinking about what? The financial position being moved toward what? The direction is the lens that gives all the other habits their focus. And the direction must be renewed every day, because the day's demands are a constant force, redirecting attention, energy, and effort toward whatever is most urgent, rather than toward what has been decided. Here is the exercise that combines all 10 into one daily practice you can start tomorrow. Before you begin anything else in the morning, take 10 minutes. Write one sentence answering each of these. What is today for? What did yesterday actually produce? What is the most important task today? What is working right now that I can see? Then, at the end of the day, write one answer to what exists now that did not exist this morning. That is the entire practice. 10 minutes in the morning, one sentence at night. Everything else, the protected thinking hour, the first task priority, the financial review, the relationship contact, the physical practice builds around that 10-minute frame. The frame is the structure that holds the other habits in place. Do this for 30 days, not 29, 30 unbroken days. The first week you will have to remind yourself. The second week it will begin to feel necessary. By the fourth week you will feel the difference between a day that begins with the frame and a day that begins without it, as clearly as you feel the difference between a full night of sleep and a poor one. Rich people are not more disciplined than other people in some absolute sense. They are more disciplined about specific things, daily, without exception. Those specific things compound. The gap between the person who does them and the person who does not is invisible at day 1 and unmistakable at year 3. Come back to this tomorrow, before the day begins.